Welcome to Hope Lies Waiting. I'm Joy, and this is part 3 of my series on my life's journey. It is going to be focusing on the spiritual aspects of it. Please keep in mind that this isn't supposed to be a commentary on whether any particular religion is right or wrong. This is simply my personal experience and what brought me to believe the things that I believe. My family was not a religious family in any aspect. My parents did send my sister and I to Sunday school as children, although I suspect it was more to have the kids out of the house for a few hours each weekend, as opposed to any real concern about our spiritual health. So I went into it like it was just another type of school where I was going to learn things. I listened to the lessons. I slowly made my way through all of the Bible. It didn't leave me feeling fulfilled in any way. There was something about the contradictions within the Bible, especially between the Old Testament with the vengeful, rageful God versus the New Testament, where Jesus spoke of a very loving, caring God, that made me think that wasn't the path for me. It just made no real sense for me. As a child, a lot of what was in it sounded more like fiction than things that might have happened actually in reality. I thought about it for a while. It didn't resonate with me. So rather than pretend belief in a religion that I didn't feel I believed in, I decided that I would simply be a good person, do right by others to the best of my ability, be helpful, kind, that sort of thing. The taking much of what Jesus actually taught to heart about how we should treat each other. But I would live my life without trying to get into what was true or false about God's existence. I just wanted to be a good person, and I was satisfied with that. I can remember when the internet was really starting to gain traction with the general population, and people were constantly coming out with these quizzes where take this quiz to determine if you're this or that. And I'd go to the ones that were about what religion are you really? And it would usually come back with the response of secular humanism. I did choose to keep an open mind. I wasn't going to rule out the existence of God. I just wasn't interested in pretending. I will admit, for most of my life, it seemed like the odds were against my ever choosing to believe that God exists, especially considering my struggles with depression and the abuse that I was experiencing at the hands of my parents. It also didn't help that among the many people of many different faiths and cultures that I've met over the years, the ones that seem to come across with the nastiest attitudes always claim to be devout Catholic or Christians. It boggles my mind that people that are supposedly followers of Jesus can just be so downright nasty to other people for no reason at all. So that's pretty much how things were for me for years. Actually, to be honest, it's pretty much how things were for me until last year, to be more specific. I do remember one very strange incident during my years of isolation where I was drowning in the depression. And there had been one night where I suddenly woke up and I could feel somebody lying down in bed beside me and then giving me a hug. But there was no one there. I know it wasn't a lucid dream. I know that I was most definitely awake and that I was really feeling that weight on the bed next to me and the hug. And I had no explanation for it. I could remember one of my cousins talking about how her father frequently visits her in her dreams since he passed away, but I couldn't think of anybody who's been in my life that might try to do something similar for me. For me, it was just a total mystery. And even now, I can't explain who it might have been, but certainly I do understand now that what I experienced that night was very, very real. Bringing things to more or less the present. If you saw the last video of my journey that I posted, you know that I'm doing much, much better in life now. Things have improved for me immensely. One of the things that has happened is I've been in contact with a friend who's playing the video game that I had mentioned that had involved a lot of drama. He was still playing it after several years, and he happened to mention that one of the friends who went no contact with me was also still playing, and in fact, they were playing together at that time. That kind of broke me down. It brought back the flood of memories of all of the drama that had been going on and how friends had ended up estranged from me, including the one friend mentioned. I didn't go into detail in the last video about that friend, but he had truly been a very good friend to me. And it was really strange that we were even friends in the first place, considering the way our relationship started, where he was mocking me in private messages until I got to the point of just asking him to please leave me alone. Stop sending me the mocking messages, sent me an apology a couple of weeks later, then decided to start inviting me to play through some content with him. One thing I've always known is that, yeah, people change. That a lot of times they do bad things for dumb reasons. They learn from experience. They regret the past. So it's better just to go ahead and forgive them. It makes it simple. You stop carrying around the baggage of the pain that they might have caused you, and you give them another chance. And so I did with this particular individual. We ended up good friends, at least from an online gaming perspective. He was very, very careful about keeping information about his personal life separate from his game friends, although over time we grew comfortable enough with each other. We did start sharing a little bit of personal information. But anyways, we had a lot of good times playing together. We did some crazy stuff. He would pull crazy stunts on me. I would pull crazy stunts on him in return. And the one thing I realized after he went no contact was that I trusted him completely, almost instinctively, once we got past that initial unpleasantness. And I couldn't understand it because, from my perspective, my trust warning system should have always been on high alert with him, considering how our friendship started. But it wasn't that way. There was a natural comfort I felt when I was doing things with him, and I never thought to question it at that time. This was going on for a few years. Then the drama situation popped up. He was one of the ones that had been trying to stay neutral because he was friends with them as much as he was friends with me. But things got to the point where he just couldn't allow himself to stay there in the middle of it anymore. He had gotten his degree, he was ready to start his career, and all of that. He just didn't need it to be part of his life at that point in time. I understood. I never held it against him. I respected his decision to go no contact. I think we had one brief encounter some months later but just kept it very neutral, almost businesslike, and then moved on. I returned to playing that game a couple of years ago. The one old friend that I had still been in contact with told me he was still playing. Went through the whole emotional overload of the memories from the drama coming back. But finally, I decided I needed to reach out to him just to say thank you to him, as that friendship had meant an awful lot at a time in my life where things were going very badly, thanks to my parents. I wanted him to know how much it had meant to me, because during my years of isolation, I would think back on our friendship and some other friendships I'd had over the years that were kind of similar in nature. And the memories helped me to keep going when, for the most part, I really just wanted to give up and get life over. So I created a character on the server he was playing on. I sent the message to him, and after I sent it, I realized I had forgotten to add my name at the end. And he did reply to the message that I forgot to mention. I had sent the message via the in-game mail system, and so he replied to it the same way, pointing out, okay, he doesn't really know who this is, but he's glad that he was able to help, and thanks for the thank you, that sort of thing. So I saw it and I debated, should I just send a quick message back saying this was me? Decided against it, because he was just the type of person I know that I was not the only one that he had that sort of an impact on. He was just one of those people that would be there to help out if he could for anybody that was in need. And so I left it at that for a few months. But I started getting this feeling that, no, I should go ahead and send him another message, including my name, to do it properly. I wrestled with myself for a couple of weeks over this. It's like, should I really do it? Wouldn't it just be better, for my own sake, just to let it go, leave it in the past? But the urge to send him the other message would get stronger, and finally decided, okay, I will go ahead, send him the message again, and expand a little bit on the thank you, and wish him all happiness on his life's journey. One other thing I did that was last minute spur of the moment thought was added my identification info for setting up myself as a friend on the game's chat application that functioned outside of the game environment. A couple of days after I sent him that mail, and I am getting ready to load up the game, and I discover that, yes, he's sent me a friend request on the application, and I was like, wow, cool. That would be nice to really chat with him again. I accept the friend request, and I'm logging into the game. As I'm logging into the game, he's already sending me a message, and he's asking me if I read his mail response yet, which I hadn't, because I was just logging into the game for the first time in a couple of days. He said his life's journey was at an end. I had known that he had battled cancer in the past in his late teens. It evidently had returned. He was now stage 4 terminal, no chance of recovery. He told me that he was actually kind of surprised that he was still around. He had, based on what his doctors had told him, he had expected to pass away before then. As he put it, steady diet of opioids kept him going. I took the news pretty hard thinking about it. even with all the things that have happened since, it still hits hard. But we went ahead and got to, talking about the things that he had done over the years since he went no contact, his job, the passing of his own mother, some other stuff. We played through a little bit of content together for old time's sake, and we called it for the day. For me, it was really hard to process. I was useless for a period of several weeks trying to cope with the news of his situation. Would send him a few messages through the game's chat app, which he would reply to, mostly sharing memories of some of the stranger things we had done together over the years when we were friends. And then he disappeared. He never went offline on the game chat app, though, and that gave me hope. I figured as long as he was showing logged in there, even if it was just showing him his way and not actually online, that he was still with us. And then about a week and a half later, he did reappear online. He said he had been in the hospital because there had been a massive buildup of fluid in his body that they needed to drain. But it looked like that his time had finally come, and he was going to be making an appointment with a hospice company the following week to start his hospice. I can't remember how I replied to him at that point, beyond something along the lines of that I would always remember him and to wish him love and peace if we didn't talk again. And I was still just devastated by this. And that bothered me. I did not understand why I felt the grief so deeply over someone who really had just been a casual online gaming friend for a couple of years, over a decade in the past, especially since I had never felt that way when it came to the passing of my grandmother or my parents or my aunts and uncles that had passed away over the years. I mean, this was someone that was still mostly effectively a stranger to me because he really didn't share all that much of his life with me when we were friends. But it was just like getting pounded over and over again by a sledgehammer. Some of my other friends, when I talked about how hard this was hitting me, would say, well, this is a good thing. God intervening to give you a last chance to talk to him, which just made me feel incredibly bad to think that it was possible that he had still survived as long as he did, solely for the sake of me getting a chance to talk to him, and all of the pain and stuff, not just him, but his family were probably going through. It made me angry, to be honest. What point is a God that causes people to suffer? But the situation was what it was. Better to try to think positive as life was reaching its end. So some of my old curiosity kicked in from when I was a child and my need just to learn and know more. I went online and started looking up information about hospice and what hospice is like at end of life and what the dying person experiences. It had YouTube lead me to a video from a podcaster who was interviewing a hospice nurse about end of life and near death experiences. Near death experiences, just seemed like a fascinating topic, and I started exploring that more. And it began to open my eyes to spirituality. Going through the information, you learn that it doesn't matter where someone was born, lived, and died. It doesn't matter their culture, their faith. Those that have verifiable near-death experiences, verifiable meaning that there are medical records that demonstrate that the individual had passed away for a brief period of time before reviving. There is just an amazing consistency to what they would experience while they were dead. It wouldn't be the same in every, exact detail, because what they experience would be influenced by where they grew up, what they believed, and that sort of thing. But there were always certain elements that were present. And some people would have a longer experience in the afterlife that gave them more information that they were allowed to bring back with them. This information just clicked something inside of me. I was like, no, this makes sense. We're reading through the Bible and all of, the stuff within the Bible, if you read through it as a whole, had so many inconsistencies, so many things that seemed far-fetched. Not to mention the fact the Bible had been written about 1700 years ago now. What might have been true and believed then doesn't necessarily match the information we have now. And so it was very consistent. Someone having a near-death experience, assuming that they don't get met by somebody on the other side who tells them almost immediately, no, sorry, this is not your time to die, you need to return right now. If they were there for a while, they would go through a life review. They would be able to talk with their loved ones that had passed away already. Some of them would be, like I said, would be given additional information. There's just a whole new existence opening up and being revealed through these near-death experiences. Suddenly I found myself believing this is what is really happening to us. This is God. God is love. Everybody who's gone through talks about just this overwhelming unconditional love they're constantly feeling, because that is God. God loves us. You think about all these terrible things that happen to us during our lives, and there are people who go, how can God do this to people? Why would God choose this for people? And part of the information that they're bringing back is that God doesn't choose these things for anyone. We all have our free will. God does not interfere with our free will. He may ask things of us, but he doesn't demand things of us. But the reality is, most of these terrible things that we experience in our lives, especially if they have a major impact on how we view our lives, our higher self that our soul is part of is the one who made the choice to experience those things. That really flipped everything on its head for me. Would I worship a God that is causing all these bad things to happen? No. But if I'm learning that I made the choice before I was even born for these things to happen because they were intended to be a learning experience for me, that makes a lot more sense. There are still some things that are randomly influenced by free will, but most of what we experience in our lives, things that are planned out in advance, and we choose a purpose for our life. This is what we intend to learn in this life. This is what we want to accomplish in this life. And we live our lives trying to achieve those purposes and learn those things. We have our spirit guides that kind of nudge us when we need a nudge to get us going in the correct direction for our purpose. We have our guardian angels. People talk about them, and yes, they actually do exist. We have our guardian angels that are watching out for us, trying to help us avoid anything that would prematurely cause us to die before what we have planned. It made sense to me. They started talking, there's a lot of discussion about Jesus, why he was really here on earth, the message that he was trying to share with all of us. I don't want to get too deep into discussing those things. Honestly, there's so much information out there and people far more knowledgeable than me. I'd rather you go seek that information if you're interested and get it from them instead of listening to my version of it. Jesus was here to teach us that God is really loving, not the vengeful, angry tyrant described in the Old Testament. I found myself believing. I believe in God now. I feel the love that is there that I couldn't feel in the past when I was drowning in depression and abuse. Again, there's so much more I could say at this point, but I don't really want to go into that detail here. I think it's better to learn from other places. I've got no doubt now that what I've gone through in life is something that I chose for myself before I was born, because I know how much I have learned from those experiences, how much I have grown as a spiritual being by going through those things. All in all, we are here to learn, and the thing that we are most especially intended to learn is to love ourselves, to love one another, to learn not to give in to fear. And there's just, the world would be such a better place if people truly embraced what Jesus had been trying to teach us 2,000 years ago, instead of giving control over their lives to the distorted version that the Catholic and Christian churches have passed down through the centuries. And let me make it clear, I'm not trying to say that those churches are evil, that the clergy are deliberately manipulating people, or to drive them away from what Jesus and God wanted us to learn for their own reasons. I think for the most part they are just as much victims of the distortions that occurred centuries ago as the rest of us. And it's going to take a lot of work to try to undo that damage and get people to open their eyes to the truth. But through love and compassion and forgiveness, it's very doable. And we would all be in a better world if we could do that. So I think that kind of wraps up what I want to be saying in this particular video. Going forward, I'm going to be making videos on more specific topics, focusing on what things I now believe or think based on what I've been learning over the last year, what can be used to help each of us find hope, find answers for what troubles us, how we can take these lessons and create a better world than what we're currently living in. That means, of course, that there will be occasions where the topics will be somewhat political in nature. It's unavoidable, but that's the state of things, unfortunately, in the world in general right now. I mean, what's going on here in the US doesn't only affect Americans, it's having an effect worldwide. And it's a worldwide effort that is going to be needed to overcome the damage that is being done right now. Thank you for watching. Peace, love, and joy to all of you. Take care.